Welcome to the Reporters Square Table presented by Lending Tree. I'm Matt Rochinski from Hornets.com, being joined as always by Sam Perley and John Foke, with a special guest this week in Walker Mehl of the Locked On Hornets podcast. Also does some work for AM Radio 730. Walker, great to have you here so far, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I appreciate you guys having me on for one thing. We've been keeping busy at the podcast. We've been doing a lot of rewatches, finding some things to talk about, living in Hornets nostalgia. So we've been okay. We've been good trying to come up with some content to talk about the Hornets.
Yeah, I think everyone's struggling with that the same way. Thankfully, we've got a lot of great classic things we can refer back to. There's so much history here, as well as, we're creating some new content on our side, getting creative with what we're trying to do. I'll tell you one thing that really did help for all of us, though, let's be honest, The Last Dance. The last 5 weeks of this have been absolutely amazing. Wrapped up this past Sunday. I just want to start, John, let's start with you. What was your overall take on The Last Dance and how things wrapped up?
John, I loved it, obviously. And the one thing, so many people, for so many people, I think this was a glimpse, at something that they didn't have a whole lot of experience in living through. For me, it was just great memories. I mean, this was when I was in high school, and I remember so much of these moments. I remember where I was during a lot of these moments. And so I don't know that I necessarily came out of it saying like, oh, I learned so many new things, is as much as I had just a great trip down memory lane. And throughout the course of it was texting with my brother, texting with my friends. Do you guys remember when we were watching this game? Do you remember this moment? And it was just so much fun. There was so much nostalgia to it for me. And then the other thing was, I just missed the physical basketball. Like when Gary Payton could put his hand on your hip and guide you wherever he wanted. When Bill Laimbeer would slam you to the ground and there was no foul call. Like I loved that style of basketball. That's what I grew up on. And, we haven't seen it in so long that you kind of forgot what it was like. And so this was a great, great trip down memory lane.
What about for you, Sam? Obviously you're a younger guy when you're watching this. What do you think when us old guys are watching it?
I think my biggest takeaway from it was kind of like seeing the storytelling of each championship. I think the biggest takeaway I got from it was they did go 6-0, or MJ did, and Scotty, but they were so close on a number of times to just – it's a shot in, 93. You look at that double or quadruple block on Charles Smith that swings that series against the Knicks. You have the Paxton shot. You have a Steve Kerr shot. It's so hard to win 6 championships, and – the margin of winning and losing is just, it's a couple plays here and there. And he's a couple plays away from being 4-2 maybe. You never know. So sometimes the ball bounces the other way and it just never seemed to do. And that's what's so remarkable and how challenging it is. I guess winning consistently is like the margin for winning and losing is so small. And they just time and time again found a way to win and never really ever put themselves in position in a game 7 in the finals where, a mistake. So it was really, I think I'm safe to say, like everybody else, could watch 10 more episodes and still have more questions and want to see more. So tremendous viewing experience and much needed during this time.
Now, I want to get Walker's take because, Walker, I know you're an Indiana guy. Probably a Pacers fan. Looking back in those episodes, episode 8 when we're talking about the rivalry with the Pacers, how was it for you watching that and what have you taken away from it?
Yeah, I absolutely have some Pacers fandom in me. My family being from Indianapolis, I had to do I had to try to walk a fine line of splitting my duties between the Hornets and the Pacers growing up, because I did grow up in North Carolina and I did pull for the Hornets. So getting to see both the teams mentioned were really cool. But watching Reggie Miller and that Pacers team come so close, it goes to show you just exactly what Sam said, how vulnerable the Bulls were at times, that it did take a couple of shots, a Paxson shot here, a Steve Kerr shot there, and then those fortunes went to the Pacers every once in a while, right? Reggie Miller hits that insane shot, and Michael has this heave that just bounces off the backboard and the rim and rims out. Eventually, the Pacers would fall after that jump ball. I think they talked about being a key play there. It was interesting to see that Pacers team come so close. Reggie Miller talking about trying to knock them out. But it takes a perfect formula, right? Michael erases a lot of mistakes. Scotty having to be a guy that could work really well alongside Michael. Getting Dennis Rodman, it goes to show you how tough it is, as Sam mentioned, to win 6 titles, and they really did have a perfect formula with Phil Jackson, of course, to tie it all together.
Yeah, it's crazy to watch what they were able to accomplish. And I grew up in Detroit, and it was tough for me to watch as a Detroit fan from time to time, Walker. But I'll tell you what, it did give me more respect for that Bulls team and what they were able to accomplish and how big of an impact they were able to make on this game. So there's been a lot of guys that have been talked about in terms of being interviewed in the Last Dance, things we've seen. Is there anybody you look at, Sam, and say, man, I really wish I would have heard from this guy. It would have been great to hear.
Yeah, I think obviously hearing from Jerry Krause would have been really interesting, especially with the dynamic of breaking up the team. Obviously, that's not feasible because I think he passed away a few years ago. But I think, and I believe it was Jason Hare, so they reached out to this individual and, expectedly didn't. I think Brian Russell would have been fascinating to hear from. I think this is a guy that had a pretty good NBA career, solid, 7,000 career points or so, but he's known for one play in his career, and he's on the opposite end of it. And it's not totally unexpected. They didn't want to talk about it, but it's weird how, one play in a 10-year career kind of defined him, and it wasn't even a play he made. He was on the receiving end. So hearing his input on the final shot, and I know he was trash talking a little bit with MJ, like the years when MJ was coming back and was guarding him on the game winner, I think in, what was it, 97, game 1 or something, and just hearing Hare's perspective would have been really interesting. But I don't fault him at all for declining. I don't think they ever got a hold of him. I think it was kind of assumed he wasn't going to participate in this project.
What about you, Walker? Is there somebody you go, man, I wish I could have heard from this guy over the course of this documentary?
I couldn't think of anybody that I really wanted to hear from. Jerry Krause is an answer, of course, but that wasn't able to happen. I think I would have liked to have heard more from different guys. I would have liked to have maybe heard more from Tony Kukoc, because he was a huge part of that team. And they talked with him about him coming over, right? Him having to deal with Scottie and Michael, being angry, the fact that Jerry Krause just liked Tony Kukoc, that he was the guy. And they got his perspective on that, and I liked listening to that. But then kind of just we didn't hear a whole lot about Tony Kukoc in that three-peat, and he was an essential part to that. I would have liked to have heard even a little bit more from Scottie, which is kind of funny because we didn't hear a lot from him, I think, kind of in the middle episodes. We heard a lot on the Scottie episode. We did hear a little bit at the end. We didn't hear a whole lot in the middle parts of those episodes. I think maybe I would have rather have heard more from different guys that were already interviewed. I can't think of anybody that was left off that I would have loved to have heard from. I think we got the Jazz perspective from John Stockton just fine. I didn't need Karl Malone. It would have been fine, but I'm cool with John Stockton being there. I think just more maybe from some of the other guys that were interviewed already.
What about you, John?
From any of the officials in either the game where Reggie shoved off on Michael or the game where Michael shoved off on Brian Russell. I think that would have been really interesting, because that is, like, I remember at that time, all of us were like, wait a minute, that was a push. And, Reggie pushed off on Michael. And then Michael obviously, like, explained it from his perspective. And so you heard, both guys kind of talk about that play, but I thought it would have been interesting to hear, even if it was someone from, the head of officiating, about, okay, in this moment, here's what happened, kind of like the last 2-minute report, to give it a little bit more depth to those plays, because those plays, the Reggie shot and obviously the shot by Michael in game 6, those were critical plays. And so just adding a little more depth to it, I think, would have been interesting. Because, Pacers fans have their version of it. Bulls fans have their version of it. Jazz fans have their version of it. And so it just kind of, to maybe put all the controversy around those plays to rest.
I think it's great. You're right. Which one of you guys had mentioned, we think we could do probably another 10-part documentary with some of the other things we all want to see. There's so much that's there and so much you could dive into. But what an amazing job being done by ESPN, the producers, everybody in this project. It was just insane how good it was and how it really captured the attention of everyone. So we'll play a little game here. So if you wanted to see the next big sports documentary or find more out, go behind the scenes even more, what's the story you'd like to see more another one of these done on? Let's start with Walker. We'll give him first shot at this one.
Yeah, I mean, well, what's funny is they're coming out with more 30 for 30s, and I'm interested in all three of them. The Lance Armstrong 30 for 30, I'm going to be very interested in. Bruce Lee and the 1998 home run race between Mark McGwire as well as Sammy Sosa. I'm going to be really interested in all three of those. And I think the other 30 for 30s that would come to mind, I would have liked to have seen, maybe Hakeem Olajuwon and those Rockets teams that got in the middle there when Michael was taking a break. I would like to maybe get to the rise maybe of a Hakeem, get to the rise of the Rockets that won in the middle of the 90s. I would have liked to have seen that, but I'm really interested in some of the documentaries that are already in the works, to be honest with you.
What about you, John?
I would say the 2017 Minnesota Lynx, the WNBA champions, the journey that they went through in 2017, how stacked that team was with MVPs and Olympians, and what they went through from being, ousted from their home arena because of renovations, having to play the regular season in one arena, having to play the playoffs and a championship in another arena, having their starting point guard break her hand as they were in pursuit of the best record in the history of the WNBA, and then having to survive not having her and having her come back for the playoffs. That was the team, obviously, that I got to cover and broadcast and be around. But the journey of 4 championships that they put together from 2011 to 2017, the way that they lost in 2016 on a last-second shot in the final game of the finals to the LA Sparks, and then meeting them again in the finals that went 5 games the next year. There are so many great storylines. It was such a great team full of just amazing and colorful players and the coaching staff that I think that's a story that hasn't been told and one that really should be that dynasty that Minnesota put together.
That's a tremendous call there. I think, and I like how we're kind of varying where we're going with some of these stories. Sam, what would you think?
Yeah, I think the first one that pops to mind, like Walker said, there's a lot of good documentaries out. Personally, I'm really excited for the baseball one next month with Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire. But I think kind of hearing the tale of the late 90s, early 2000s Lakers and how they kind of picked up this throne of the NBA's it team. I think when you had Shaq come there, they had Kobe coming into his own. I mean, they had 2 of the most popular players in the game with the most popular team in the biggest market. And they were huge in 2000, 2001, 2002. And I think, for better or worse, while people like watching these documentaries in terms of seeing how good they were, I think there's a certain curiosity about how these dynasties fell apart. I think that was a big talking point in this Bulls one, how it ended in terms of, paying the players. I think the Lakers one is, and you guys talked to the Warriors one recently. How do these things, it's going so good. How does it happen? How does success, you guys are having success, what leads to it? Obviously, the biggest challenge with the Lakers one is Kobe Bryant not being able to tell his side of it. And he's such an integral part of it. But, if there's a way they can do that one, I think that would be kind of that sort of 1996 Lakers when Shaq got there to like 05 when they lost to, or maybe 04 or 05 and lost to the Pistons in the finals, I think would be really, really compelling.
Yeah, I think that would be an actually cool story to see how that Kobe-Shaq dynamic, everything worked. It would be awesome to see. I'm going to go with one just because I want to bring it up, and it's kind of a little bit more off the wall, but I would love to see a long-term documentary made about the rise of Hockeytown. When you look at Detroit Red Wings, I grew up in Detroit and as a Detroit fan, obviously, Steve Yzerman joined that team back in the day when Wayne Gretzky was joining, the Edmonton Oilers at the same time. If not for Wayne Gretzky, Steve Yzerman might be a well-known hockey name. Like, it already is a well-known name, but might be one of the most popular hockey players ever to play the game. But he just was matched up at the wrong time against Wayne and what they had to go through to beat those Oilers teams and turn it from the worst team in the league to Hockeytown. I just think that there's a definite fun story there, and we can finally explain that octopus to anybody who's ever had any questions about it. So I think that would be kind of fun. But it's fun to look back, and we've been doing that a lot. We talked about, watching classic games, talking about classic games. We're seeing those being aired. We're seeing those, out there right now. What are some of your guys' favorite classic moments from Hornets history? I'll start with Sam. What's something that kind of stands out to you?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is one that I experienced firsthand. I think I didn't go to a tremendous amount of Hornets games growing up, but I really kind of fell in love with the team probably like when they traded for Glenn Rice. So seeing him kind of come in and just, he's a new guy in town. He is scoring off the charts in the All-Star games. But for me, it was a firsthand. I think it was the only playoff game I ever went to in the old Classic Hornets was Game 4 of the 2001 Eastern Conference semifinals against the Bucks, and it was they tied it 2-2. And you're reading about, and they had this team of Glenn Robinson, Sam Cassell, and a young Ray Allen at the time. And I thought these guys were just like, great careers, obviously, but I thought they were world beaters. There's no way you're going to beat these guys. They were really, really good, those three. And they ended up, coming back from 2-0, tied it, won Game 5, had the big lead in Game 6, and then couldn't finish it off. But just being at that game and just hearing it was one of the last playoff games of the original era, just being there. I think it was maybe 12 at the time. I really remember that just because maybe I was there firsthand, and just the energy that place had in tying the series against a really, really good Bucks team at the time.
Walker, we know you've been covering quite a few of these on the Locked On podcast. What are some of the ones that kind of stand out to you, or the one that really stands out to you the most?
Yeah, it's hard to pin it down to one. One memory that I have is I was working late in the studio, and I was just getting back with 7:30 the game after I was working. Working, interning there, and then working a Charlotte Knights game. I leave, and I'm trying to make it home back in time in that game that Courtney Lee hit the game-winning shot. But I needed to get some food in me, so I drive through an Arby's, and right as I'm through the drive-through, I have to wait to go get the food because the Courtney Lee shot is happening real time. So the call comes in, Courtney Lee hits the 3, and we have a real chance in Charlotte to actually win a playoff series. Like, it's a real shot that we haven't had since that Bucks series that Sam just mentioned. And I was really excited for that. I remember watching that Bucks Hornets series. Ray Allen actually hit a dagger baseline 3 as we just did a rewatch for there. And you have to imagine 0-1 going up against the 76ers. The Bucks gave them a fight. Maybe the Hornets could have given them a fight to possibly go to the NBA Finals. Very close, the Hornets came to maybe even making the 0-1 finals. Those are a couple of the moments that come to mind. That Courtney Lee shot, though, that was one that I was really excited about. And then, of course, Game 7, Dwayne Wade happens. We all know how it ends. But there was a shot that we were going to win a playoff series for the first time in a long time.
I do love the fact that we can relate something that's relatively soon to being classic Hornets at this point in time, too. At this point it is. If you look where the team is, that's in the past and a tremendous memory. One of my favorite moments from ever being at a game, to be honest with you, when we were there covering that, it was just amazing to watch that all happen and see that arena just finally go silent. It was the best feeling in the world to quiet down that Miami arena. So I want to move on real quick. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but ESPN recently put out the top starting 5 all time for all NBA teams. The ones that were on the Charlotte one that was announced yesterday: Kemba Walker, Del Curry, Glenn Rice, Larry Johnson, and Alonzo Mourning. Can anybody argue with any of the 5 that were on there? And if you can't argue that somebody else should have been, because I can't really argue myself, who do you think that kind of next level guy that might fall in the next 5 are? Let's start with you, John, who somebody might fit there.
Well, I think in the next 5, you definitely throw Baron Davis in there, maybe Jamal Mashburn, trying to think, but it's really hard to look at that first 5 and say, oh no, this guy absolutely doesn't belong in there. There's no player that you could say, there's a huge controversy surrounding this player. I thought they did a good job with that. I do think though that certainly Baron Davis is going to be number 1 in your next 5. And, you could make a case that he does belong in that first 5. You could find a place for him, but I think he's the biggest name that jumps out to me.
So what about you, Walker?
Yeah, I agree with the ESPN top 5. The one that I really struggled with was figuring out a way if maybe you put Glenn Rice at the 2 and then put Gerald Wallace at the 3. But then you start to look at Del Curry, and I just think he works better if I were to put that 5 and compete with whatever level of competition you want to put him against, the other top 5 for the other franchises. I like that team a little bit better. It's crazy. Think about the shooting on that team. Kemba becoming one of the better shooters. Dell's one of the best shooters of all time. And the numbers that Glenn Rice put up with that Hornets team are just absolutely insane. The 47% from 3 that he had one of those years, one of his all-star appearances that he had. Gerald Wallace, I wanted to kind of carve a space out for. Al Jefferson deserves to be on that second tier just for the All-NBA selection that he had. Anthony Mason also, I think, deserves to be in that next tier. The only argument I could have come up with, though, was the Gerald Wallace at the 3, Glenn Rice at the 2. Overall, I'm fine. Del Curry, you can stay in there, man. That was I'm just fine sticking with the original 5 that ESPN gave us.
Yeah, you'll never get any argument from me about Crash. Loved watching that guy play.
Yeah.
He was the one highlight back then in the day. So it was tremendous to see him. What about you, Sam? Anybody you think that, that maybe these guys haven't mentioned?
No, I think first off, I think ESPN kind of nailed the top 5, and it makes you think a little bit when you see Larry and Alonzo there. I mean, man, if they could have made it work with the salaries, and I know Larry had some back injuries and stuff, but man, what could have been with those two, because they were at the peak of their positions in that game. Kind of echoing a little bit, everyone said, you know what, I think second team, you got to go Muggsy. I know it's tough there, and Barron's a tough one too, but I also had I threw in Eddie Jones as well. I know it's kind of an under the radar, and I looked at guys kind of maybe what their best year. I know some guys didn't play for super long, but Eddie Jones was great when he was there. All defensive team, I think. Having him and Muggsy together in my second team, obviously Gerald Wallace, Anthony Mason were huge presences, and then I'm taking 2013-14 Al Jefferson in that, because I mean he was kind of the last great, truly great season by one of those old school traditional centers. How good he was, kind of with the footwork and the pivoting in the post, and just those perfect teardrops and jump hooks at the end there. I mean, it was a lot of fun to watch. So, but overall, I think they nailed it in terms of the lineups from the top 5.
Yeah, when you're talking about these lineups and you're talking about Al Jefferson back in that day, man, that when we talk about what could have been, when you're talking about Larry Johnson, Alonzo Mourning, Al Jefferson, what could have been in that series if he doesn't aggravate plantar fasciitis in Miami when we had the lead in that game in game 1 and things were looking absolutely tremendous. We still had a shot to win that series, but to Walker's point, I think that there's no chance we'd lose that series if Al's healthy throughout it, and who knows what would have happened. Well, it's been absolutely amazing just kind of sitting down and talking with you guys, reminiscing talking some classic Hornets, talking The Last Dance. Walker, it's been awesome to listen to your podcast. We really enjoy listening to those on Locked On Hornets. We want to make sure that our fans are out there following that as well, and make sure you hop on there. These guys are doing tremendous work over there. For Sam Purley, for John Folke, and for Walker Mehl, I'm Matt Rachinski for Hornets.com. Thanks for joining the Reporters Square Table presented by LendingTree.